All right, welcome everybody to the first ever Wifcon podcast. My name is Don Mansfield. I'm here with an esteemed panel that includes Ralph Nash, Professor Emeritus at the George Washington Law School, author of several books, including Formation of Government Contracts, Administration of Government Contracts, and several others. Jim Nagle, who was a co-author on Administration of Government Contracts, also the author of History of Government Contracting, and also contributor to the Government Contracts Reference Book. And Vern Edwards, contributor to the Nash and Sabinic Report, also author of the Source Selection Answer Book, and an author of the Government Contracts Reference Book. And I'm Don Mansfield. You probably know me from Wifcon. I've contributed some articles to Nash and Sabinic Report. No books yet. So I'll get there.
You're young.
So we all took note of this executive order that came out last week. I'm going to go ahead and show the audience what we're talking about. So the White House issued an executive order called Restoring Common Sense to Federal Procurement, signed on April 15th. And most notably, this calls for reforming the federal acquisition regulation. So I'm down here in section 4, and it says within 180 days of the date of this order, the administrator, which we don't currently have an administrator, that's the administrator of OFPP, in coordination with the other members of the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council, the heads of agencies, and appropriate senior acquisition and procurement officials from agencies, shall take appropriate actions to amend the FAR to ensure that it contains only provisions, and it doesn't define provisions, that meet one of 4 criteria. And the 4 criteria are they're required by statute, or that are otherwise necessary to support simplicity and usability, strengthen the efficacy of the procurement system, or protect economic or national security interests. So let me turn to you, Ralph, and get your initial reaction to this order.
Okay, just a couple of things about the executive order, Don. The next thing says that it covers all FAR supplements. That's section 5, which makes it a much bigger project. And then section 6, which is an idiot provision, says that there should be a 4-year sunset on all non-statutory provisions, which is really stupid. But anyway, so there's a lot of stuff in here. The one thing that isn't in here is what we all believe they are trying to do, and that is to make the FAR shorter. So let me address that. When I first heard about this project, my instinct told me that it was not a good idea. But since then, I've had to think it through. And here's why I think I was right. What is the FAR trying to do? That seems to me that's a critical question. And as best I can tell, it's trying to be the Amazon of government procurement. It's trying to be a single place where contracting officers can go to get information on any old problem that they might encounter, from market research at the beginning to contract closeout or termination at the end. So it tries to be that. Now, that's a lot of different topics. It's about the substantive provisions are roughly 1,700 pages long, and they deal with a ton of topics. If you look at the different issues that they try to cover and take them one by one, you don't get the feeling that there's an excessive amount of coverage, but they use up a lot of space. Let me illustrate by looking at the biggest issue right now in government contracting, which is termination. Okay, so because, we've got a lot of terminations that we got to figure out. That's part 49 of the FAR. And that, as best I can tell, that provision was drafted by the ASPR committee way, way, way back. Vern's our historian. He could pin it down. But it's been in the regs for at least 50 years, maybe longer. And it's a good provision. It's served well. It's helped everybody, and it lays out the basic rules of the game. But it's a simple little old problem. It is 71 pages long. Okay, and that includes part 49, the clauses, and the -42 cost principle. So that's a lot of words. And anybody would be a fool to try and deal with that. But nonetheless, if you're going to have a shorter FAR, we'll see what happens. Let me turn to one other issue. If we look at the back end of the FAR, parts 52 and 53, we're talking about over a third of the FAR coverage. Part 52, the standard clauses and solicitation provisions, is 660 pages long. I'm using the CCH version, the page count. Part 53 is 100 and some odd pages. All total over 800 pages, as I said, a little over a third of the FAR. Now, what are you going to do with the standard clauses? This is where industry gets dug, because if we begin to cut out standard clauses, we deregularize the system. What that means is, I guess what it means is that we would allow people to handwrite their standard clause. So let's look at Jim's area. Let's say that you cut out the standard clauses for construction contracts. None of them are prescribed by statute. So you cut out the differing site condition clause, suspension work clause, which have established a long-standing risk allocation process. And you let people write their own clause on covering delays. You're going to let them do no pay for delay clause like the Architects of Capital did some time ago. That might be a very good choice for some enterprising lawyer in some agency, but does it make any sense? I mean, if you begin doing that, you've destabilized the whole system. So, to me, most of that 660 pages should not be touched. But again, that's a lot of pages. And with that, let me stop, Don, and I probably used up more than my amount of the time.
No, not at all. All right, Jim, let's go over to you. What are your opinions on the executive order?
Well, they've tried something like this before. Some older hands may remember that 25, 30 years ago, they started a program to break the FAR into 2 volumes, a very thin volume, things required by law, and then the other volume was going to be best practices, which was the big buzz phrase at the time. They didn't get very far at all in that. It just died. I think it was just too difficult for them. But if they go ahead with this project, I think 2 things are going to result. First, there will be a great deal more discretion on the part of contracting officers. There'll be fewer shalls and shall nots, and that is what I think one of the concerns Ralph was alluding to. And the second thing is it's going to be much more difficult for contractors to raise a successful claim or protest. Now contractors can go, contracting officer Don, you violated FAR 15.umpty-ump, a regulation of the enforcement effective law, and you're already rounded second. But now if it's just a guidance or best practice, it's going to be much more difficult for you to do that. The The second concern I have about this is the time limits, that 180 days. Now, eliminating the portions that are not mandated by statute, that they can do very quickly. They can probably do that with AI in 2 or 3 days. But deciding what stays in the FAR because it enhances sound procurement estimations or procedures or so, that's going to take the wisdom of Solomon. As Ralph indicated, off the top of my head, I can't think of any statutory basis for the changes clause, differing site condition clause, termination for convenience clause, most of the inspection clauses, but you absolutely must have those. So I would hope that the people who are going to be doing this are not just bright people, but are bright people who have a lot of experience in awarding and administering these contracts. The other thing I want to point out about that executive order, especially in section 5, they also talk about the FAR Council giving deviation and interim guidance authority. So I get the impression that this is going to become effective long before the statutory requirements are met in terms of public comment. For example, they may come out with an announced change to the FAR, and they'll have, say, 60 days to comment on it, what have you, and then they'll work out the final rule. But in the interim, it sure sounds like the agencies will then at the same time come out with their deviations from the FAR as currently written. And then the last comment I'll make is, what the heck happens to 41 years of case law when all that happens? It seems to me that if a case was built on something in the regulation, not based on statute, but the regulatory authorities' view, and that's gone, then that case becomes irrelevant. If it's based on statute, then the case law remains. But there's an awful lot of case law that is based on items in the regulation that just make very good sense, cost realism analysis before you can award a cost reimbursement contract, for example. I don't know if that's required by statute, but boy, that makes a lot of sense. So I don't know what the judges and the GAO are going to do with that. I suspect that if this project goes through, a lot of times the GAO and the judges are going to have to say something like this: we think what the agency is doing is foolhardy, but we can't find a regulation that prohibits it, so let the agency do with it and live with it whatever they want. Okay, so with that, Don, I'll shut up and let Vern talk.
All right, good comments. Vern, did you have an opinion on this?
Yeah. If the goal of this project is to make the acquisition system, or more specifically, the contracting system, contracting part of acquisition, work better, then it's futile. Because the system does not really work badly because of the FAR. Now, having said that, would I like to cut the FAR? Sure. It's actually, Ralph has his number wrong. It's 2,000. If you look at it in the 3-ring binder version that you can download from acquisition.gov, the PDF version, the FAR is 2,034 pages long as of today. If you add the 3-ring binder version of the DFARS, which is itself about 1,500 pages now in that format, you've got a 3,500 page reg. And if you add the PGI, the Department of Defense Procedures, Guidance, and Instructions, that's another 500 pages. You're up to about 4,000 pages of regs, just the FAR and the Defense Department. And other agencies have supplements too, some larger and smaller. The system, the most common complaint I hear about the system now is it takes too long to get on contract. And I've written articles. I mean, I've seen procurements that have taken 4 years to get on contracts, including the the bid protest. I've seen procurements canceled, important defense procurements canceled because of how long it had taken to get on contract and bid protests. We see myriad bid protests, sometimes 100, 200 protesters on multiple award task order contract competitions. It takes an awful long time to get on contract. And even if there's not a protest, it takes a long time. To me, the greatest problem with the acquisition system is not the regulations, although they present some facet of the problem. It's the workforce. If you go, I go to sam.gov every day just out of idle curiosity to look at solicit announcements and solicitations. Notices are poorly done, and solicitations are horrific. I mean, just terrible, terrible solicitations, poorly designed, poorly executed, poor designs, poorly executed. And all of that adds to the cumbersomeness, the cost, and the failures of the system. Rewriting regs isn't going to do it. A lot of what's in the regulations is due to mistakes that have been made. And so you've got bid protest case law. And the example that I will use in this podcast is take a look at two sections of the FAR, 15.306, exchanges with offerors after receipt of proposals, and 15.307, proposal revisions. Together, they're about 1,300 words in length. The statutes on which they're based, 10 U.S.C. 3302, I think is one of them, or 3303, and the identical statute, word for word identical in Title 41, are only about 170 pages. 170 words.
Okay, words.
Yeah. So you've got 1,300 some pages to implement 173 word statutes. Something's wrong with that. Why is that? Regulation comes from several sources. It comes from basically experience, which results in legislation and regulation. It results in litigation, interpretation, and case law. And you've got thousands of pages now of case law. All of this since 1947, which began the modern era of procurement with the Armed Services Procurement Act. And I've got a treasure load of regulations dating back to that time. I can follow every step through. I can follow the steps of competitive negotiation, how it was developed. And what you had was agencies trying to figure out, how do you negotiate with multiple parties at one time? How do you do that? Especially if you're told you can't provide any information about the competing proposals. Like, you can't say, well, they're offering a price of 10 million. What will you do for me? You can't even identify the other offerors. So the idea that the market somehow is having an effect on all this is absurd. In major systems, you don't have a market for pricing. It's all buildups. Regulatory reform is going to accomplish nothing until you train, till you educate and train a workforce that's beyond competent, that is able to, in a masterly way, conceive, design, plan the execution, and execute relationships that we call contracts. That's mastery. You don't have much mastery in the system now, hardly any. And you need mastery to train up-and-coming new contract specialists and contracting officers. So to me, this effort's futile. However, for people like Ralph and I, who write about this, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to watch it. Watch them fumbling around. I'll say this much. The president gave them 180 days to, it's not clear from the order whether it's 180 days to get started or 180 days to complete. But I guarantee you the administration wants something done before the administration is over. So they've got about 3 years. Keep this in mind. It took 2 years to revise just FAR Part 15, which produced the language we have today in 15.306 and 15.307. And when they announced that project in 1995, their reasoning was they wanted to simplify, permit innovation, and improve the process, which is very similar to what the president says he wants in this executive order. I think they've been given mission impossible, basically. I don't have any idea of the qualifications of the people who will be working on this. None of them have been identified. It's in the hands of the administrator of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. We've got an acting administrator. We don't know anything about the people in OFPP. I know nothing about their qualifications. You know, they don't answer the phone and they don't answer their emails. So at least for me. So, and I know they don't even answer them for Ralph half the time. So how they're going to, who these people are and how they're going to get this done is a bit of a mystery. They've issued no plan yet. It's an interesting thing. We'll have fun with it. We'll write about it. And they'll finish something and declare it a success, which is what they always do with all like performance-based contracting. We conceived it, it's a success. It was all lies, but they did it anyway. That's my take.
All right. Thanks, Vern. So my take is if the goal is to take out things in the FAR that aren't required and put them somewhere else, I think that makes it administratively easier to maintain the FAR. And that's already been done by DOD with the DFARS transformation in mid 2000s. They took out everything that was an internal procedure, guidance, and information and put it somewhere else. So now they can change that without having to go through the rulemaking process. I assume that has made things easier for maintaining the DFARS. I know GSA, they also separate out in the same document, in the GSAM, they separate out what is regulatory and non-regulatory. So they don't have to go through rulemaking to change something that's non-regulatory. So I like that part of it. Unlike Ralph, I do like this sunset provision of 4 years. Currently, nobody is really maintaining the FAR in that sense, as far as does this rule still make sense? Or, you know, does it need to be updated or does it need to be taken out? I don't think that's done. And so I kind of like this forcing function of let's take another look at what's in there and just see if it's accomplishing what it was supposed to accomplish. And another thing, the FAR has only grown. It really hasn't shrunk. So I kind of think that's necessary to kind of keep it from growing or growing too much. So those are a couple of things I like about it. The things I think maybe that are not foreseen is some of these things that might be taken out are necessary. And maybe if they're taken out of the FAR, an agency might still want to do whatever that rule was. They still might want that policy, or they still might want that procedure. Okay. So maybe they issue some kind of internal memorandum saying that, let's just say cost realism. Let's say cost realism is taken out of the FAR because it's not statutory. But DOD, they still want that done in their cost reimbursement contracts. So they issue a memorandum, an internal memorandum saying you shall do cost realism for any cost reimbursement contract. Okay, now, according to statute, that policy also needs to go through rulemaking. because it has a significant effect beyond the agency, the internal operating procedures of the agency. So now that rule should be in their supplement. And if that's the case, what have we really accomplished? It seems to me like the amount of discretion that the administration wants to give to contracting officers, I don't know if that's the amount of discretion agency heads wants to give to their contracting officers. So that's something I kind of think, all right, so we streamline here, but is this going to just kind of foment local acquisition regulations or local clauses or things like that that are kind of under the radar? So that's my reaction to the order.
No, I can chip in here.
Sure.
The problem with the FAR, from my view, is not that it's too long or whatever, but that the system that we're dealing with, the procurement system, is changing faster than the FAR can be amended. So, I mean, we've got 50 FAR cases pending, and Congress every year throws more problems into the hopper. The FAR literally can't keep up with the goal that I said it had, which is to help a contracting officer in every situation. You know, for example, cybersecurity. So my question is, well, look, if we've lost the ability to keep up, then why do we have a regulation? Aside from the clauses, I think the clauses are really important. But for Vern's area, why not just give them the statute and let them work from the statute? You know, did the contracting officers need any more help than that? I don't know. But the idea, you know, the fundamental question is the FAR going to stay trying to carry out its fundamental goal, which is to be this Amazon of government procurement? Or are we just going to say to hell with it? It can't be done anymore. The regulatory process is too slow. The world is changing too fast. Now, what are you going to get? I track the software cases, okay, and I write about them all. And there's a case where we've got contracting officers with a lot of discretion because there's no guidance. And what do we end up with? We end up with contracting officers signing EULAs and user license agreements. One recently admitted in the litigation that he hadn't read the agreement. He just signed it. And so he agreed that the license, that the software could only be used on one seat. He didn't ask the question, what the hell is a seat, right? He just signed the full thing. So we'll find out. Some judge is going to tell us what a seat is. But, I mean, if you read that litigation, it illustrates Vern's point that the contracting workforce just can't deal with wide open discretion. They need a hell of a lot of help. And I'm not arguing that the farm gives them all the help they need, but I don't see how taking away help is going to make the system work any better. I think the whole thing is a total disaster, but that's my guess. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, the other concern I have.
Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
The concern I have is that one of the main goals of the FAR was to make procurement processes uniform throughout the executive branch, so that whether someone was selling to the Army or the Agriculture Department, it was going to look basically the same.
That's right.
If we eliminate so many things and give more contracting officers more discretion, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, but you're ash canning the idea of uniformity, because then in a very few years, the procurement practices of the Agriculture Department will differ markedly from those of the Army and the other agencies. And there is a great benefit to uniformity. We all realize that the FAR should be shortened. This is a scary document. This intimidates a lot of people from selling to the federal government. But I have shortening it, we all, I think, agree on that. But deciding what of the clauses, for example, that remain, boy, that's going to be a hellacious problem. With that, I'll shut up and let others talk.
Oh, you don't have to shut up. Yeah. I just think, the purpose of a rule book is to state the rules. The rules of baseball don't tell you how to field a hard hit fastball coming to second base and where to throw it after you field it. That's something you just have to learn how to do, right? I think the FAR should be a rule book. These are the things you must do. These are the things you must not do. In between, do what's best. And that requires people who know how to do it. You can't have a quarterback in the NFL checking some rule book just before the play is called. I mean, it's absurd. You need a workforce that is educated, that they understand concepts, principles, rules, processes, procedures, methods, and techniques. They've learned how to do that. They've done an apprenticeship. And in the course of that, they've learned how to write a sole source justification. They've learned how to prepare a set of contract line items that are coordinate with the specification of the statement of work. They know how to write a clear synopsis. They know how to design. And contracts, by the way, the contract documents and the relationships that those documents record are products of design. You design a contract. In fact, there's a whole movement now among lawyers about contract design. People wrote about it decades ago. How do you have to buy something. In order to buy it, you have to establish a relationship with someone. What should that relationship be like? How should it work? What should be its terms? And you have to design that. And that takes a knowledgeable person. It takes somebody who knows something about what they're buying. And the old Armed Services Procurement Act used to say that the key to effective negotiation was to understand the product or service that you're buying. And when I bought reentry vehicles for nuclear warheads, I had to read up on what was a reentry vehicle and how does it work and why should you buy it this way. These are things people must be trained in. They must be trained initially by having a fundamentally good education, followed by an apprenticeship achieving journeyman status. And some of them will go on to be masters, and those people should become contracting officers, or at least supervisory contracting officers. And you maintain the workforce through that system. It was the system I went through 50 years ago. I can remember being assigned to my first contracting officer and preparing my first solicitation, and I made an error, and he pointed that error out to me. It chewed me out, told me, go out, get this thing reprinted and corrected and reprinted. Don't ever bring crap like that into this office again. I'll never forget it. C. Howard Kirk. I was lucky to survive Howard, but boy, did I learn contracting. I just don't believe you can prepare a cookbook. Good cooks, great cooks, don't use a cookbook. And I don't think you can make a cookbook for contracting. It's too big a field. It's too broad. There are too many different things. Buying services is a completely different problem than buying supplies. Completely different problem. The very nature of services makes it a different problem. I've written extensively about that. But if you ask the typical contract specialist, what is a service? you're lucky to get a coherent answer. They'll probably repeat the definition of service contract from FAR Part 37. You can't run a procurement system with a workforce that's not ready. DAU, Federal Acquisition Institute, have been horrific failures in this. Running these little short courses and relying on these certified professional contract management tests are not the way to develop a workforce. I think Don and I talked about this the other day. I think there's something like 36,000 GS 1102s, and then there's a bunch of 1101s that they created so they could get around the education requirements out there doing contracting. You've got to ask yourself how to solve the problem of providing remedial education to that workforce. And I'm not talking just training courses. I mean serious, difficult education in concepts, principles, rules, processes, procedures, methods, and techniques. And that takes time, takes effort.
So Vern, continuing with your analogy with the rule book, I see a need for playbook or multiple playbooks. Who should write the playbooks?
Well, what I would say is if you got to have a book to do it, the only people who should be writing the books are people who are good at two things: that they know what they're writing about and that they write well. And you've got to find those people, you know. And I'm talking how-to stuff. And then you've got to be able to educate them. That this, what we're going through now with education, is all these online courses. And having instructed them, I can tell you, half the time you don't know if the people are really in the course. They log in, and I'm convinced that half of them disappear off and on for a certain amount of time. The notion of being tested horrifies the students. I don't often sense, I shouldn't say often, I sense on occasion that there's no real interest in learning. This is, I got to get my points, annual points, and so I'm attending this class. And then again, there are students that I've stayed in contact with for many years who were just wonderful. I mean, they were devoted to really learning this topic. They had hard questions. They participated actively. They were willing to write and fail and try again. I'm writing an article about this now for NCMA magazine, Contract Management Magazine. And we need a professional ethic that says a person is judged by their work products, not by some test score. Show me a solicitation that you prepared. I want to see it, and I want to talk to you about it. I want to see your line item structure. I want to see your special clauses. I want to see how well you write. You say you've written you've written a performance work statement. I want to see it. I want you to explain to me, what is a service result? What kind of thing is a service, and what kind of thing is a service result? And then show me the service results you described in your performance work statement. It takes that kind of intense teaching and commitment for people to learn. And it takes a special kind of people who want to learn that.
Why don't we go back and talk about the FAR? Don, your idea is an interesting idea. It's not in the executive order. That's to have a guidebook and kind of create a PGI for the FAR. And the guidance, if you were going to do that, it's a good idea, I think. Although if you package it like the GSA does, you're not going to cut the length down any. It's still going to be long. But the guidance would be very different, because the PGI guidance is that you pull stuff out that only is internal procedures, right? But that's not the guidance in the executive order. It's quite different. It's on the screen. it's all this blown up words that nobody knows what they mean, but the efficacy of the procurement system, whatever the hell that means, or simplicity and usability, whatever that is. But it's certainly not the same guidance as PGI was created for. That makes some sense to me, maybe. But again, you're not shortening anything. You're changing how you implement it. Because you don't have to go through the regulatory process for your guidance. But you haven't shortened very much.
You want to shorten the FAR? Require that for every sentence you write, you be able to provide a statutory citation.
Well, but so
that's the president's order, Clark. That's the president's order.
Well,
if you can't provide a statutory citation for your sentence, you're done.
No, that's not.
No, that's not what it says.
There's three other criteria now.
It's got to be essential to implement a statute.
Okay. No, or that are otherwise necessary to support simplicity, usability, strength, and the efficacy.
So, Vern, you're going to cut out part 49, right? Just drop it.
I'm not going to cut out anything. I don't think this project is worth pursuing. I just think it's going to be pursued, and I'm going to enjoy watching it. You guys are taking it more seriously than me. I don't take it seriously at all.
Well, but if all you leave in is what's required by statute, you've got garbage.
You're going to have garbage anyway.
You haven't. Well, a lot of the FAR is pretty useful. I mean, if you take it issue by issue, don't talk about the whole thing, all 1,500 pages plus
cost realism. Jim mentioned cost realism. All right. What's in the FAR that's useful? What are you going to put in the FAR that's useful about cost realism? Right now, it boils down to about 3 sentences.
Where did it come from?
Came from GAO decisions.
Yeah, it came out of case law.
Cost realism.
GAO required cost realism before it went in the FAR.
Yeah. It's only in the FAR because of GAO.
That's right.
In fact, FAR Part 15, probably at least a third of FAR Part 15 is just based on GAO case law.
That's right. Okay, but all these that Don's put up, the CFR, all these different issues, you can shrink them a little bit by cutting some verbiage out, maybe, but that's not going to get you where they think they want to go. I think you got to stop talking about some of the issues. You just got to take that coverage out of the FAR. Well, let me give you a suggestion, a goofy idea if you want to make it shorter. Let's take part 19, okay? That's pretty long. It's small business.
And complicated.
Yeah, and it's complicated, but I can make that in 1 page, right? All I have to say is, if you've got a problem with small business, go read the SBA regs and here are the sites, right? And then here are the clauses. That's all I got to say. And
you'll remember I wrote an article to that effect in the Nash and Stepanek report saying they should take all that stuff out and just put a link in the FAR to the SBA regs.
But does that
just read the SBA regs? Same with the labor rules.
Yeah, does that make the system work any better?
No.
See, what the FAR people did is they took the SBA regs, which are written in a very different way, QA kind of way, and they translated the SBA regs into FAR language. I don't know whether that helps or not.
They did the same thing with Title 29, Department of Labor.
Same thing with labor, same time with EPA. If you want to make it a short, just tell people to go read those other regs. I don't see how that helps any. And in your area, I just put the statute in the FAR and turn people loose. See what happens.
Here's a problem. Think of 304 evaluation factors for award. Grab at random a contracting officer who does source selections and ask one question. what kind of thing is an evaluation factor? Don't give me an example of an evaluation factor. I want to know what kind of thing it is that is true of all evaluation factors, regardless of what they address. Now, if you have someone who understands and can answer that question, you don't need 15.304, except to say, by statute, these are things you have to evaluate.
Yeah, again, you put the statute in. In this particular area, the FAR almost repeats.
But that doesn't tell that person, if they don't know, what kind of factors they should be using in their RFP. They just cut and paste, soundness of approach, right? Understanding of the requirement, right? Qualifications of key personnel. They write that stuff, but they have no idea how to measure it. FAR mentions rating. What is rating? Why do you rate proposals?
They just copy.
What utility is rating? Because FAR talks about rating, right? If you can write what you want in a book, if the person doesn't understand the concept, it's no good to them.
I agree. By the way, on your point of the workforce, the administration not only issued these executive orders, but they cut out all the intake for the workforce. Yeah. So the administration basically said, we're creating a system where you can't hire new people very well. But it's the new people is the hope for for your kind of proficient workforce. You're never going to retrain the people who've been there 25, 30, 40 years.
Well, as you said a moment ago, let's get back to talking about the FAR, I guess, because, the administration has issued the orders it's issuing, and I don't want to get into a discussion about, Yeah.
Let me ask a question. I want to focus on something Don, I know, was very good at. Within 6 months, we're going to start seeing a lot of proposed changes to the FAR. They'll be announced in the Federal Register. There'll be a comment period. It is essential that everybody, contractors and government people, read those proposed changes critically and comment on them. Now, Don, you have as good a track record as anyone I know of on getting your comments adopted in the final rule. So what would your suggestions be there?
Most of my comments that do get adopted don't really have to do with the policy. It really has to do with the writing and being clearer, and maybe just pointing out things that maybe the rule writers didn't think through before they wrote it. But I've never challenged a policy in my, but that's probably why I was successful. I kind of come from the standpoint, I'm with you on trying to implement this. I just think that it would be clearer if you did this, or more effective if you did that.
By the way, Jim, it was in an article, I think it was in Government Executive, this morning or last Friday, that the administration is looking for a way around the notice and public comment procedure.
Exactly.
You may not get to see a proposed rule.
Well, I don't know how they're going to be able to do that, considering the statute. I looked at the statute before we started again.
Since when has the administration worried about how they're going to do it?
Statutes are so 2024.
But
statutes are so 2024.
Here, Jim.
but if they did it, it would be a Donnybrook.
Yeah.
Because you would get, you know how the system works now. They respond to every comment. Can you imagine writing the Federal Register, responding to every comment you get on this rewrite?
Yeah.
Now,
I don't know that you're going to get to see these rules, Jim.
Yeah. I don't see how they're going to be able to get around that, though, Vern. I think I looked at the statute before we started, and it seems pretty clear.
Well, the executive orders, there's a plan to
We've got-
publicize.
We've got 60 injunctions when they found a way to get around the rules. I mean, what makes you think they're going to follow the rules?
Oh my gosh, we're getting way off target here now, guys.
Well, it does say in the executive
you're making
order.
a supposition that's part of me would be happy to see them get around notice and public comment.
Yeah.
It takes a long time. It ties everybody up. I mean, I've talked to people on the FAR Council when I've commented on a rule, and they've said, "Well, you're right, but you're making everything harder, Vern. You're making everything harder." I've had them tell me that. I've had them call me up and tell me that. With these comments. For the FAR, the heck with the rules. It's the statute. Just go ahead and put it in there.
And Don has highlighted the interim guide to deviation, which, of course, may be a way to get around this. I don't know.
And they don't publish those deviations first.
Well, they are going to. That is the plan. Deviations first, rules later.
The best laid plans of mice and men often go on a glen.
Put out the whole rewrite as a deviation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what that's what I mentioned in my remarks. I think these will be effective immediately while the comment period is ongoing.
Right.
There's an argument for that. I don't know how much of the defense feeds you read, but there's real concern, widespread concern, that we're getting ready to go to war, and we're going to need a procurement system that works. And if that's the case, the president can declare a state of emergency. I mean, I'm not counting on being able to see these rules, and I rarely comment on them anyway. And it has to be something really egregious before I would ever comment. And I usually do it kind of behind the scenes. But I mean, or Ralph and I write about it, make fun of it in the report. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to see. It will be interesting. But my point simply is, if you're looking
to write about,
my feeling is, if you're looking for real change in the system, that comes from people, not from books.
Just to go back on, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ralph.
Regulations have never changed the system. And in my view, I mean, to my way of thinking, trying to change the FAR is like looking at a mirror and blaming the mirror for the fact that it's making you look ugly. The FAR doesn't make very much policy. It does in some cases, but it doesn't make a whole lot of policy. But it tells you about a lot of policy. And the problem, you mentioned, Vern, you mentioned labor, EPA, all that stuff. You got all these socioeconomic things that are statutory, so they're going to stay in. But they're part of the problem if you're trying to expedite procurement.
So just on the point of the deviation being issued before the rule, I think that this is 41 U.S.C. 1707, and it says that a policy, regulation, procedure, or form may not take effect until 60 days after it's published for public comment in the Federal Register. I have a feeling they're not going to comply with that.
Yeah, maybe not.
I don't think they're complying with it now.
Yeah, true.
I think the
Well,
ones
they're going to rely on A2, exception.
Okay, but it still needs to be published, right?
Yeah.
You can say it takes effect earlier, but it still needs to be published.
After the publication, Well, the one thing we can agree on is that we're glad we're not assigned to this project, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a terrible assignment for somebody to be given.
It depends. I feel I could rewrite 15.6 and 15.7 down to a very short passage in one day. Now, it might not make everybody happy. I'm not saying it would be accepted in one day, but if you really understand the problem, you can write it. But if you've got to research it first, there are things in FAR I'd have to just do an awful lot of research in order to find out how to rewrite it. One thing they can do is look at some policies that got into the FAR a long time ago that we don't need anymore. And professional employee compensation, I've written about that. That policy was ginned up in the 1970s as a way of preventing Congress or persuading Congress not to expand the Service Contract Act to cover professionals. And it was based on a few incidents having to do with NASA contracts. And it's found its way into the FAR, and somebody ought to just take it out. The government's in no position to evaluate professional employee compensation. Let the employers figure that out, and the employers and the workers figure that out. They never did it before. They just did it because of two incidents that NASA solved on its own. Why do we have a reg for it? There are several things like that in the FAR. A lot of the coverage in subpart 15, part 15, subparts 1, 2, and 3 could go. It's just unnecessary. It's confusing. Doesn't add anything. People can figure that out without that coverage. But there's other stuff I just don't know about.
You just took out oral presentations.
No, I'm not saying delete it all, but they put oral presentations in there. Now, we figured out oral presentations before there was ever mentioned in the FAR. I found the other day the original memo I wrote to the Air Force telling them to get rid of technical proposals and prepare oral presentations, and they were the first ones to do it. The problem is that people who didn't really understand the rules felt that you had to have written proposals and oral presentations. So we ended up really, in some ways, making more work instead of getting rid of work. They've never really understood it. And one irony about discussions is that one of the purposes of the rewrite was to make discussions more productive. Discussions aren't more productive. People are so afraid of discussions, they generally want to award contracts without discussions. We don't even keep statistics anymore on whether contracts, national statistics on whether contracts were awarded with or without discussions. For a while they did that, but they don't anymore as far as I can tell.
Well, I think we could all take a piece of the FAR that we think is not well done and rewrite it to make it well done. But I don't think that's the assignment of the executive order.
No, it's not.
It's not to improve the FAR. It's to slice it up.
Well, it's to reduce it. The big complaint about the FAR is its size. Look on the internet, you'll find that complaint constantly. And there's no question, it has grown significantly over time. And the quality of the writing is not always good. Sometimes it's just ambiguous or ambivalent or hard to interpret some passages. What does that mean exactly? We've got all that. You talk about a part of the FAR you could get rid of. Look at 15.4 on cost and price analysis. Why do you need it? You've got the contract pricing reference guides. Why not just refer to them? Take out all that crap. I'm not talking about cost allowability. I'm not talking about the cost principles. I'm talking about the pricing instructions. Why do you need that? Get rid of it if you want to. You've got the contract pricing reference guides, which are in depth. Why do you need 15.4 anymore?
You need it because you're trying to help contracting officers with your one-stop Amazon logic.
Well, just put a link in the FAR to DAU and the guides. Don't repeat all the text.
Yeah, I mean you can just link the FAR to all kinds of things, but I'm not sure that makes the system work any better. It just means people have to go check something else.
Regulations don't make the system work better or especially worse. People do.
Well, I think the downside is a lot more scary than the upside here. But who knows? I mean, we have no idea what they're going to show us.
We don't know who's doing it. We don't know if they're qualified to make those kinds of cuts. That's not putting anybody down. I'm just saying I don't know. They're doing this. They're people whose identities we know nothing about, their qualifications we know nothing about. I think this has been done. This is a project that presumably is underway. I find it interesting, but I don't expect it to be effective in terms of long-term outcomes in contracting. I don't think it has anything to do with long-term outcomes. But we'll see. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing that fascinates me, Jim, to some extent, is how many people in industry are cheering for this, saying that this is a great step forward. And I just wonder, whether they understand. I mean, for example, your construction contractors, go back to my example. What if they cut out, none of the clauses are required by statute? What if they just threw all that out and said to everybody, you write your own clauses? Boy, I tell you, industry would be so screwed up, they would never know how to deal with that. Particularly small businesses, they'd have to hire lawyers just to analyze all this new language that they're seeing.
Oh, actually, Ralph, I disagree with you. I think construction, they would go, fine, get rid of the FAR. We'll use the AIA forms or the AGC forms, because at least in the construction industry, there are well-established forms that industry is well used to. I think the problem would not be in the construction industry. I think it would be the supply and services industry.
Especially the services industry.
Yeah.
Because services are so diverse and complex. They're more complex. Well, especially when it comes to quality assurance.
I think we all agree that Part 37 of the FAR is one of the most useless parts. But I mean, because after all, we're spending half of our money on services, and nobody's ever written any decent guidance on how to buy services. So,
well, I did, but
yeah. He said useful, but
they're not part of the FAR. And
that's true.
But if we took Vern's guidance, what would happen to Part 37? It would get longer, not shorter.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we had an OFPP that would be allowed to carry out the functions that OFPP was originally designed to do, if we had a quality contracting or procurement, whatever you want to call it, acquisition's too big, procurement or contracting, if we had that, a real think tank, people up there who could think through these problems and put things out, it'd be better. If we had a decent textbook on how to write a statement of work, a decent textbook about it, a sensible one, that would be a big help. But I don't know if we'll ever have those things. If I could be president of DAU for 1 week, the first thing I would do would be to cancel a lot of courses and try to hire some technical writers to produce some good textbooks on just a few problems, and have established reading groups in offices with guidance on how to read, to work those over. I don't know. I believe it's people. You have to invest in people, not books, not books of regulations. By the way, Jim, that little CCH FAR you had they're now charging $375 a copy for that thing.
Yeah,
You can't
that's
even
amazing.
give it to people to use to
Yeah.
study anymore.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's ridiculous.
Well, your material, Vern, could go into Don's guidebook. Right? That would
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
would be good stuff for the guidebook. If there's
Yeah.
going to be a guidebook.
I think there's a real opportunity for people to write playbooks.
Yeah,
You know, this is how we would do this, solve this problem.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Ralph, your conclusion in just a few words. Less a minute or less.
Well, I think we're about to drive the machine off the cliff, but I don't know because I haven't seen what they're going to give us.
Well, let me give you mine. Whether or not we like it, this is coming. It's already been ordered by the president. There certainly can be some useful things that will come out of it, scraping off the barnacles that have accumulated on the FAR over the last 41 years. But whenever those proposed changes are announced, and I think they will be, look at those things critically and comment on them. Convince the drafters, no, this should be changed. This should be eliminated. Otherwise, we're going to be in a world of hurt for the next decade.
Well, my final thought is for all of the contracting people out there concerned about this, don't worry about it. It'll be interesting to follow, even maybe fun to follow, but the real challenge for you is to learn your business, to pursue mastery in your field, which means self-study, self-questioning, and devoted reading and thinking.
My final thought is, I guess overall I'm hopeful. I think there are people in the contracting workforce who know what they're doing, and this frees them up. So I'm also kind of a wait and see. So, you know, maybe we'll have more podcasts on as things materialize.
Oh yeah, we should.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you hopefully another time for our Wifcon podcast.